Mist clung to the jungle like a heavy veil, turning the early morning light into a muted haze. Every leaf glistened with dew, each droplet reflecting slivers of pale gold that shimmered before vanishing into the shadows. Hidden within that shifting tapestry lay Sergeant Ethan Cross, motionless beneath a layer of foliage that blended him seamlessly into the forest floor. His breathing was slow, controlled, shaped by years of practice and an instinctive understanding that stillness could mean survival. Through the lens of his rifle's scope, he watched the clearing ahead, an unnaturally bare patch of soil carved out of the wilderness to receive visitors humanity barely understood. The galaxy had finally come knocking, though not with the reverence or diplomacy Earth had expected. Instead, the Coalition had arrived with clipped impatience, as if anxious to evaluate whether humans were worth the trouble. Ethan found the uncertainty of their intentions more unsettling than the jungle's predators. A faint hum began, so soft it trembled rather than echoed. Ethan adjusted his grip. The hum grew into a resonant vibration that stirred the air and sent ripples through nearby puddles. Light descended in a shimmering column, severing the mist as though drawing a curtain aside. Out of that luminous pillar emerged a vessel, sleek, seamless, devoid of rivets or imperfections. It hovered for a moment before settling onto the damp earth with a grace Ethan found both elegant and ominous. He touched the comm device at his throat. Command, visual contact with Coalition craft. Static crackled before a voice replied, acknowledged. Maintain eyes until delegation makes the first move. Ethan allowed himself a faint smile. Wasn't planning on blinking. The vessel's ramp unfolded with mechanical precision. 6 beings descended, each one shaped differently, yet unified by the same polished confidence. Armor gleamed where skin might have been. Limbs articulated with a smoothness that suggested both strength and practiced restraint. They looked around with expressions impossible to read, though their body language hinted at curiosity laced with impatience. The tallest alien, armored in pale plates etched with geometric patterns, stepped forward and scanned the treeline. Its helmet retracted with a whisper, revealing a face smooth as polished stone, lit by eyes that shimmered like molten metal. Human observer, it called, its voice translated through a faint metallic resonance. You may reveal yourself. Your camouflage is impressive but unnecessary. Ethan exhaled quietly. So they'd noticed him after all. He stood and brushed leave from his suit before walking toward the clearing. Their eyes widened fractionally as he approached, perhaps surprised that their sensors had identified him but not pinpointed his exact position. That minor victory satisfied him more than he let show. Sergeant Ethan Cross, he said, stopping a few paces away. Recon Specialist. Welcome to Earth. The alien commander inclined its head. We appreciate your cooperation. Our purpose here is simple. To assess your planet's readiness to contribute to our joint conflict with the Vornac Dominion. Ethan didn't flinch. And you're here to judge whether we're useful. An efficient summary. The commander's tone bordered on dismissive. Our preliminary data suggests your species relies on kinetic weaponry. Primitive, yet persistent. Another alien gave a soft laugh, a sound like metal wind chimes. You hurl metal shards propelled by combustion. Charming. Ethan studied them, noting the confidence, the superiority woven into every gesture. Primitive doesn't mean ineffective. We shall see, the commander replied. A demonstration will be arranged. We are eager to understand the limits of your methods. Ethan nodded once, letting the challenge settle between them. The jungle rustled, as if reacting to the tension simmering across the clearing. Then you'll see what you came for, he said. The commander looked almost amused. We expect nothing surprising. Ethan turned toward the dense foliage, allowing himself a final glance at the hovering soldiers who believed they already understood humanity's worth. Then you're in for a long day, he murmured, vanishing back into the waiting green. The morning broke with a thin veil of mist drifting between the trees, diffusing the light into a muted glow that softened every edge. Ethan Cross stepped into the clearing with his rifle slung low, his posture calm despite the cluster of alien soldiers waiting with unmistakable impatience. The Galactic Coalition delegation had multiplied overnight. Additional troops in shimmering armor lined the perimeter, their movements synchronized with machine-like precision. Ethan felt dozens of inhuman eyes track him as he approached the demonstration area they had prepared. He kept his breathing steady, tamping down the irritation rising in his chest. The commander from the previous day moved forward, its long limbs gliding with effortless poise. "Sergeant Cross," it said, its translator rendering the words with an airy confidence. "We have assembled a basic evaluation. It is not meant to belittle your technology, merely to contextualize it." The pause before the final word was deliberate, condescending. Ethan gave a curt nod. "Let's get on with it." A group of soldiers activated a line of floating spheres, each one projecting a holographic target at varying distances. The images flickered into existence, silhouettes representing armored enemies, darting and weaving in simulated patterns. One alien soldier raised a sleek, glowing rifle. It hummed as it charged. With a flash of violet energy, a beam shot forward and obliterated the nearest target, leaving nothing but drifting embers. The soldier fired again and again, each bolt striking with explosive brilliance. The coalition troops applauded softly, as though this display were routine and unworthy of real excitement. Ethan waited until the last particle of holographic debris faded. "Impressive," he said, and he meant it. Plasma weapons were undeniably powerful, but he also noted how the rifle's barrel glowed white-hot, tiny vents along its side trembling with the strain of dissipating heat. He wondered how many shots it could fire before melting down. "Now," the commander said, gesturing toward Ethan, "you may proceed with your demonstration." He unslung his rifle with practiced ease. It looked crude beside their shining weaponry. Solid metal, matte black, built for durability rather than aesthetics. Some of the aliens regarded it with bored expressions, as though waiting to witness a quaint but outdated tradition. Ethan checked his chamber, adjusted his stance, and took his first shot. The crack echoed through the clearing, sharp as splitting stone. One of the distant targets jerked violently as the round punched straight through its head. Ethan fired again, shifting to a moving target, then another. Each bullet found its mark with surgical precision. The aliens' expressions fluctuated between surprise and subdued annoyance, as though accuracy alone didn't justify the noise or the kinetic recoil. "Projectile optimization," the commander said with diplomatic restraint, "is noteworthy. However, your technology lacks flexibility. Show us something more challenging." A squad activated hovering drones, each armored in reflective plating and equipped with nimble propulsion systems. They darted upward like metallic birds, weaving tight patterns. Ethan set his rifle aside and unfolded the tripod he had carried from the forest. The belt-fed machine gun locked into place, its design far more imposing than the Coalition expected. He squeezed the trigger. A controlled burst shredded the first drone instantly. The others scattered, but his follow-up shots tracked them with unnerving stability. Metal fragments rained down through the mist. Within moments, the clearing fell still again, only the residual smoke drifting above the shattered machines. The aliens exchanged murmurs, some defensive, some uncertain. Ethan watched their reactions carefully. They wanted to believe superiority was guaranteed. That belief was cracking. Before the commander could speak, a tremor shook the jungle. Leaves rattled in the canopy. The air temperature dropped as though something enormous had displaced the atmosphere. Coalition soldiers snapped to ready position, scanning the undergrowth. Ethan tightened his grip on the machine gun. The commander turned toward the shifting shadows and spoke with sudden urgency. "Sergeant Cross, this was not part of the demonstration." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Whatever moved out there wasn't friendly. And both he and the Coalition understood, in that single breath, that the real test was about to begin. The jungle erupted in movement, a violent ripple that spread through the brush as though the forest itself had awoken with predatory intent. Ethan dropped to one knee, angling his weapon toward the shifting shadows. Coalition soldiers activated their armor systems in a flurry of colored glyphs and rising hums, forming a loose defensive arc, though their unease was starkly visible. The tremors grew sharper, accompanied by a faint, chittering resonance that crawled along Ethan's spine. He recognized instinctively that whatever approached was hunting, and it was not intimidated by the Coalition's gleaming armor. The first Vornac broke through the foliage with terrifying speed. Its body was a lattice of chitin and sinew, plated in natural armor that refracted the dim light like blades of obsidian. The alien lunged toward the nearest Coalition soldier, who fired a plasma burst that splashed harmlessly across its carapace. The creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it slashed its serrated limbs in a blur, forcing the soldier to throw himself backward as the ground where he'd stood cracked open under the impact. Ethan didn't hesitate. His first burst from the machine gun punched through the Vornac's joint plates, dropping it mid-stride. The creature shrieked, a sound that rattled the branches overhead before it collapsed in a twitching heap. The Coalition soldiers stared at Ethan, astonished, but their disbelief evaporated as more Vornac poured into the clearing. "Form a line," the commander barked, its translator struggling to keep pace with the urgency in its voice. Armor panels snapped into defensive positions, and plasma rifles whined as they reached full charge. But the moment the aliens fired, they revealed their positions in luminous arcs of violet light, beacons that drew the Vornac like predators scenting blood. Ethan slipped backward into the brush, letting the ghillie suit swallow him whole. His absence went unnoticed for a heartbeat, and then another Vornac dropped from the canopy, tearing into a Coalition trooper before vanishing again. Panic rippled through the formation. Their weapons were powerful, but their reliance on visible energy output made them easy targets in the dim jungle light. A single muffled crack split the air, one of the Vornac jerking into stillness mid-leap before tumbling from branch. Another shot rang out, and a second creature dropped. Coalition helmets swiveled toward the sound, but the jungle concealed Ethan entirely. The realization spread among them. Human projectile weapons left no heat signature, no streak of light, no energy spike. They were ghosts in the field of battle. "Sergeant Cross," the commander called, voice trembling despite its artificial modulation. "Identify your position." Ethan ignored the request. He had a rhythm now, a quiet, lethal cadence. Each shot he fired came from a new angle, preventing the Vornac from adapting. He watched their movement patterns, noting the flick of their antennae, the angles of their leaps, and the way they favored higher ground before striking. He aimed for joints, gaps in armor, exposed sensory clusters. One by one, they fell. Coalition morale shifted from panic to awe. They tightened their formation, following the patterns Ethan's fire was creating, funneling the Vornac into lanes where he could pick them off with ruthless efficiency. Plasma shots became more measured, used defensively rather than as primary offense. Slowly, the tide of chitin and teeth began to thin. A heavier Vornac emerged from the trees, towering over the others, its armored shell ridged with scars from past battles. Plasma bursts barely scorched it. The commander shouted warnings, but Ethan was already moving. He shifted positions, found a vantage point that allowed a downward angle, and fired a storm of armor-piercing rounds. The creature staggered, roared, then collapsed under the relentless kinetic assault. The clearing grew quiet except for the labored breathing of the Coalition soldiers. Mist drifted back between the trees as though reclaiming its territory. Ethan stepped from the brush, weapon still raised, eyes scanning for movement. The aliens stared at him with something new, respect, tempered by the understanding that their technology was not the pinnacle they once believed. The commander approached slowly. "Sergeant Cross, your methods defy our battlefield doctrine." Ethan met its gaze. "Maybe it's time your doctrine learned to adapt." The commander hesitated, then inclined its head. "Then teach us." Ethan exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders, but he knew this was far from finished. The Vornac had tested their defenses today. They would return. And next time, the real war would begin. The battlefield settled into an uneasy stillness, broken only by the faint hiss of cooling plasma rifles and the slow drip of moisture from the canopy above. Ethan surveyed the carnage, noting the jagged remains of Vornac bodies scattered across the clearing. The Coalition soldiers moved among them with a mixture of reluctance and reverence, their earlier arrogance replaced by something far more grounded. They checked for survivors, recalibrated damaged equipment, and whispered quietly as though afraid to disturb the man who had saved them. Ethan cleaned his weapon with practiced efficiency, brushing fragments of chitin from the receiver. There was no pride in the task, only the familiar calm that followed violence survived. The commander approached him with measured steps, its pale armor streaked with mud and scorch marks. "Your intervention prevented catastrophic losses," it said, its voice subdued. "We underestimated both the Vornac and your capabilities. This mistake will not be repeated." The admission carried weight. Coalition doctrine rarely allowed room for humility. Ethan looked up, meeting the commander's luminous eyes. Plasma weapons have their place. They just weren't built for enemies like these. "Clearly," the commander replied, glancing at the dark shards of Vornac armor embedded in a nearby tree. "Your projectile technology bypassed every defensive protocol they possessed. It seems simplicity has advantages we never considered." Another soldier approached, holding a shattered plasma rifle whose overheated barrel had warped nearly in half. "Our weapons exposed us," it murmured, its translator carrying an edge of frustration. "Every shot gave away our position." Ethan nodded. "That's the problem with anything that glows. Light, heat, sound, they all tell a story. You've been fighting wars where brute force wins. The Vornac aren't impressed by force. They're predators. They sniff out weakness, not energy signatures." The commander's posture shifted, a subtle sign of contemplation. "Then your methods are not merely primitive. They are specialized." Ethan smirked faintly. "We call it adaptation." A silence followed, filled with the distant rustle of unseen creatures moving deeper into the forest. Coalition scouts began retrieving intact Vornac limbs and sensory organs, analyzing the patterns of damage caused by Ethan's gunfire. Their gestures hinted at a growing respect for the man who had turned the tide without advanced armor or luminous weaponry. After a moment, the commander stepped closer. "Sergeant Cross, we request that you join a combined task force. Your skills, your weaponry, and your strategic insight may be the key to countering future incursions. We must reshape our understanding of warfare, and you are uniquely positioned to guide us." Ethan considered the offer. He thought of the quiet hours spent waiting in dense jungles, the weight of responsibility each time he pulled a trigger, and the uneasy alliance forming before him. "If I agree," he said, "your soldiers have to trust what I teach them. Sniping isn't about showmanship. It's patience, discipline, and using the world around you as a partner." "They will learn," the commander said. "Today has taught us that our certainty was misplaced. We are prepared to follow where you lead." Ethan gave a slow nod. "Then I'm in. But understand something. This isn't about proving humans are better. It's about winning a war you didn't realize you were fighting." The commander extended a hand, and Ethan clasped it. Their agreement sealed itself, not in ceremony, but in necessity. As the sun dipped behind the dense jungle canopy, casting long shadows across the clearing, Ethan stepped away from the wreckage and looked toward the deeper wilderness. The mist curled around his boots, welcoming him back into its embrace. He knew the Vornac would return, stronger and more cunning. But so would he, armed with a coalition that finally understood the value of silent steel and disciplined resolve. Humanity had been mocked for its rifles, dismissed as outdated, quaint, irrelevant. Yet here, in the quiet aftermath of carnage, Ethan stood as proof that sometimes the oldest tools carve the sharpest edge. He lifted his pack, slung his rifle, and disappeared into the trees, leaving the Coalition soldiers watching with a mixture of awe and anticipation. The war had changed, and he would be ready for the next shot.